people are that can't see me.
Exactly. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Out of Nowhere. Well, I've got a very interesting show today. Not one guest, but two guests. First one is Peter Robbins. Peter's an investigator, writer, author, lecturer. I could go on and on and on with Peter. What a fantastic guy he is. And the other one is Chris Evers. Everybody will know Chris from the Outer Limits conferences and all that business over the years. He's done a fabulous job over the years, getting guests from all over the world. And they've always been really good conferences as well. I know Peter's been there quite a few times as well over the years. So, yeah. So we're going to have an interesting show about ufology and a bit about Tic Tacs. What are they? Where did they come from? And all that tonight. Now then, Peter, we'll start with you. I know it's a subject, but we just briefly talked before the show. How do you see your role in ufology then?
That's a great question. I see my role in ufology as having changed markedly over the years that I've been involved. When I first became involved, it was really not by choice. You guys know my story pretty well. A returned memory of a profoundly unambiguous UFO sighting in childhood set me off on a course of obsession, really. I wanted to know everything I could about what had happened to my sister. She had confirmed my memories of the sighting, and memory was repressed for many years, and then went on to describe to me what we would now categorize as archetypical abduction-related memories. This was 50 years ago, and I had no interest in UFOs. I had never heard of anything like this, and I set off on my journey. In fact, you can see behind me, directly behind my head, old loose leaf binders or spring binders that I began to obsessively keep in educating myself. I had never been to a UFO conference. I knew no one who was involved, and I suspected that any adult that took the subject seriously might well be mentally ill. And so I moved fairly cautiously in educating myself and finding mentors. Then, I was part of ufology, another contributor, and meeting more people and becoming involved in research projects, working through the obsession, and leaving a career as a visual artist behind, which I'm now considering kind of reacquainting myself with. But a particularly good question for me, Bob, in that now, all these years later, I'm not exactly sure what my role is, other than somebody who has been doing this for years and is still alive and is, as a result, looked up to by some for reasons of, simply not dropping out, which isn't the greatest reason to be respected. But I'm not sure where I go from here or how I can be most valuable in this field. We know, and you guys have been part of it as well, that there are ever so many good broadcasts, podcasts and radio shows now.
Yeah.
Huge number. And one of the reasons why I put off doing it for so long, that being 5 years ago when I was first invited to think about it by a radio host, because I wondered if another voice was really necessary out there, in the broadcast universe. And I'm coming to a point where I'm thinking it may be time for me to take a step back in terms of broadcasting and look to be spending that time doing more writing. Or one thing that I'm proud of is simply being available to folks who are up and coming, who want to think out loud, or just be here as somebody with experience, both good and bad, who is certainly willing to chat with folks who are up and coming.
Who did you look up to in them early years then?
Say again?
Who did you look up to in them early years?
Well, great question. My very first mentor, who I had read about in a now long defunct little UFO journal, was a remarkable man. His name was Coleman von Kavetsky. Coleman was Hungarian. Before World War II, he was a film director and became quite a optical specialist as a result. During the war, he became a staff officer in the Royal Hungarian Military Army, who was in charge of photo analysis and audio visual education for the troops. At the end of the war, I would say he fairly well, not sure how to say it, but met his karma, so to say. He worked for 7 years in Germany for the Americans, helping to repatriate Jewish people whose families had been wiped out or they had been separated from them. Part of the reason they chose him for the job was he spoke German, he spoke Hungarian, he spoke some Yiddish, and he spoke some English. And after 7 years, he was invited to emigrate and become a citizen of the United States, which he and his wife and young son did. This about 3 months before the famous Washington, D.C. 1952 overflights, which was how he got involved. And he was a wonderful person to start with. He introduced me to my second mentor, who was a tough, no-nonsense New York City police detective, Italian-American Brooklyn, and also a very good UFO investigator. He had an organization called the SBI, the Scientific Bureau of Investigation, which was basically became mostly an organization for police officers around the United States to connect and report on UFO events in their areas, because the Air Force, of course, had officially gone out of business in 1968. Of course, they stayed in business. And then it culminated with my most certainly influential mentor, and that was a man named Bud Hopkins, who is a painter like me, and who had become very interested in the subject of UFOs some years before me, but truly about the time that I did. And we connected this about 5 years before he wrote his first book, a very important book on abductions, and a very early one called Missing Time. Years later, I would have to say 1987, my fourth mentor, somebody who I knew by that point and looked up to, but had not really connected with personally, came into my life, who is Stanton Friedman. And all things considered, I think I was incredibly fortunate to have these four remarkable men to help me find my way and develop as a researcher and an investigator, and to work by a very real set of ethics, personal ethics, that, when you're right, and when you are wrong, you correct it as publicly as possible. And whatever value I have been in this work over these decades, in great part is due to what I learned from these four great guys.
Absolutely brilliant. Now then, Chris, How did it all start for you then? And how did you get into the ufology?
First of all, I want to say thanks for the invite, Bob. Very much appreciated. I'm
Okay,
sorry
man.
people can't see me, but I've got a little problem with my video camera on the laptop. Um, my own involvement began 1974. 14 years old, so strange light flying over the skies of Hull here in East Yorkshire, and couldn't explain what it was. Single light seemed to leapfrog over itself, flying through the sky from position 1 to position 3, back to position 2, forward to position 4, and it leapfrogged across the sky like that until it got approximately above my position, where I shouted to my friends, "Look, there's a UFO," which I called it that because of the TV shows that were on at the time. Things like Colonel Straker's UFO, there to save the air from the invading
Oh, yeah.
aliens and so on. So that's why I called it a UFO. Didn't know what a UFO really was, but that intrigued me enough to start reading books by people like Donald Kehoe and other American authors, people like Brinsley Le Trench and people like that really intrigued me, and I was interested in what they had to say about the subject because I was looking for an answer to what I'd seen. 51 years later, I still haven't got that answer. But over the years, I've been inspired by people like Graham Birdsall, Russ Callahan, Tony Dodd, and people of that ilk. Many people who are watching the show, listening to the show this evening, they will know who those people are.
Hmm.
And of course, I've also been inspired by people like, well, he's not been involved very long, but they call him Peter Robbins. No, I've been inspired by people like Peter. So, it's people who go out there, they put themselves on the line, and they investigate. If they're wrong, they admit they're wrong. If they're right, well, they tell us they're right, and we have to change our thinking.
Yeah, I know. It's strange, I know I had a sighting in 1964, I think it was. I saw a cigar-shaped object in the sky, and the three of us watching it over a golf course, watching for about, I don't know, 10 minutes. It just vanished in thin air. I walked off, they walked off. Next minute, the news, the Halifax Courier then used to come out every evening, and my name's in it. Man sees flying object over Halifax. And somebody had rang the Courier and told them about the sighting, give my name. We're only 17, 18 at the time. I went into work, I got ridiculed, saying you were drunk and everything like that. But I just let it go over my head, thought, just get on with life. That was my first getting into it, into ufology that way.
Yeah, life gets take over for all of us, doesn't it, Bob, at times,
Oh, God, oh, yeah, yeah. What's
Bob,
your...
a quick question for you, Bob. Before that sighting, did you have an interest in the subject at all?
Yeah, I had a little. I was trying to train. I was asking my dad then. He was still alive at that point, and he'd been working in India for about 8 years during the war. And he told me he had a sighting as a young lad, very similar to me, what he'd seen in the sky. So I don't know if it's because it runs in the family or not. Very strange. I used to see ghosts as well. As my mum used to say to me when I think I was about 5 years old, who are you talking to? I used to have a imaginary friend then. But I could see this little boy, but my mum couldn't see him. I could tell you everything about that little lad. And then my mum used to say, there's nobody there, Bob. She used to call me Robert. Strange how things move on in time. And then all them years later, you get more into it. I think it's a subject that never leaves you.
Yeah, I agree with that, Bob, actually, because even though I had my sighting in 74, I've carried on looking for reports, reading about them. Of course, we've got the UFO, excuse me, got UFO magazine back in the 1990s when that became a major newsstand publication from Graham Birdsall and his team, and collected every single one of them, and read avidly as many books as I could get my hands on. So it's always been there. It's always been an interest since my first sighting all those years ago. So eventually now, I produce, as Outer Limits magazine, which is well, we cover all sorts really, but my forte, should I say, is in the UFO world, but I do cover other things. And actually, next year, it's 10 years since the first issue of Outer Limits magazine went out.
Oh my God!
Congratulations.
So yeah, quite surprising it's lasted that long, actually.
Exactly. Well, Peter, what's your thoughts on? I know we're always on about this, about disclosure. Is it ever going to happen?
Well, the word with the capital D, most folks, it's one of two things. It's this coming event that will happen, and it will involve world leaders coming public and in their own ways telling their citizens that we're not alone in the universe, and then whatever follows. Whether that event actually ever occurs, time will tell. But the process of disclosure with a capital D has been moving along on its own quite a lively manner for the last few years, and in no uncertain terms. Every day, more and more people, the best way to put it is every day more and more people care less and less about what other people think about what they think about the subject. And the three of us know from personal experience and also from just keeping our hands on the pulse of the subject as it progresses, especially in the last, since 2018, that we are not free of ridicule around the subject, but we're definitely in a post-ridicule era. In terms of the way it was simply institutionalized, that it's a joke. We can all remember and occasionally still see a report on the nightly news, and the newsreader very awkwardly trying to wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and what do you think, weatherman? You talk about the sky, and make it into a little joke and move on to the next subject as quickly as they can.
Yeah.
Those days institutionally seem over. And it's underscored by the fact that it really doesn't matter where the reports are coming from anymore. In America here, well, all over, of course, with broadcast, but it can be a media branch associated with the right, like Fox, or with the left, like CNBC or something. They're all reporting it seriously. At the same time, the attention that has been put the last few years on the American House of Representatives and their ongoing meetings around the subject, different whistleblowers brought in some cases being elevated over time to almost a level of pop stars or the equivalent thereof. What we have going on, for whatever good it's going to do, is for me more like a soap opera, a kabuki play, an Indonesian shadow puppet performance, where it's keeping our attention. But what is really happening? Is there any progress that we can measure? And for me, and I'm curious about your guys' thoughts on this, how do you actually manage disclosure on a worldwide basis? It's easy enough for us and people who like us have studied this subject and kind of normalized, in a sense, our relationship with it, to say, disclosure now, I'm ready, and so are the people I know. Well, I think it's easy to forget that the majority, likely the great majority of people in the world, are not ready.
Exactly.
And I've heard some commentary from some colleagues and friends like, well, I am, and here we go, and they'll get used to it. They'll have some rough nights, and, then we'll all be brought up to speed. I don't know if it's that simple. It will be very difficult for some people, and for others, maybe not so much. But how does one go forward? Say you're a world leader, or been authorized as a leading world-class scientist, to publicly say, we are not alone in the universe, and we are being visited by intelligences, or they're here, and we can theorize about different things about it. But how do you make an announcement like that without some of the public saying, wait a minute, you mean this is real? And if so, what about these stories I've heard about that I never took seriously about hybrids that are part us and part them, and missing pregnancies, which are involved in this hybrid program, or alien abduction? That's going to be quite a challenge. And, the way I look at it, you can't dig half a hole. You either do it or you don't do it. And we shouldn't be glib about the challenges that face us, as members of this community, in where we go from here, and the best way to do it.
I suppose when we talk about alien visitation, there's also different sorts of aliens. Some we get on with, and others we might not get on with. How do we cope with that? That is a serious big problem, that is. And I think some of us in this past, some of us have chosen to meet people like these, and others aren't.
Well, there's the other thing of when some people refer to them, they're thinking of one group of them. In fact, the cosmos may be teeming with life, and there may be as many civilizations, groups, cultures coming and going with various relationships or feelings about humanity. And I think there's a struggle going on in the research community among some people to establish that they collectively or individually are good, or that they are bad. And it becomes almost like a sporting event. Several years ago, I moderated a panel discussion at a conference, and it was the title of the panel discussion was, "Are they good or are they bad?" And I had to laugh to myself because I thought, I'm a wise guy. They picked the wrong guy for this. And I began by saying, are we talking about the good ones or bad ones? Which got a laugh, but reality doesn't care what we believe or think. Reality is what it's going to be and what it is. Yeah. Whether we like it or we, applying the X-Files mantra, want to believe it, is secondary. We have so many more questions than answers. And I guess on a positive note, it's fair to say that whether we're talking about 20, 50, 3, however many groups there are that are coming and going, that if one of them definitively wanted to, get bad, and I mean like Mars Attacks, my favorite bad aliens, and create havoc on Earth, or subdue the human population and make us all into slaves of some sort. You can argue philosophically that they are doing that behind the scenes, we just don't know it. Or that they're allowing us to continue on as we are, for their own reasons or because part of their passion, some of their passion, is in observing our culture. Maybe they're, anthropologically oriented. Other ones who might be thinking, this little speck of dust flying through the cosmos at 30,000 miles an hour is important to us for our reasons. And what we see is the dominant species on Earth that we had hopes for are not only poor shepherds of their home, they're destroying their planet and our planet. They're a cancer. And maybe we should allow them to destroy themselves or assist them in the process, and then let nature take its course and reinvigorate and hope that the next dominant species on this earth does a better job than the current one.
Exactly. What's your thoughts on this then, Chris?
Well, just want to go back a little bit to the disclosure question. Didn't we have that to some extent in the date that Peter mentioned? I think it was 2017 when the New York Times, December 17th, 18th New York Times article, where the Pentagon admitted that they'd had an interest in UFOs, and I think that's the first big step in that they admitted they have lied to us. That's the first point of disclosure.
Yeah.
Now we're currently having these meetings. I'm sure Peter can correct me if I'm wrong in any of the descriptions of these.
Maybe not.
But they're having the house meetings over there where they're still not saying that anything is extraterrestrial, but they're not admitting where it's coming from neither. Whether or not it's coming from under the oceans of the Earth,
yes,
whether it's coming from outer space. But interestingly, in the next issue of Outer Limits magazine, I've just put an article in about, I think it's Saturn's moon, Enceladus, where they're admitting this is the icy moon with the crust of ice over what they believe is an ocean, a water planet, basically. They're admitting that in those spurts of water that they found floating out of it when they went to that area many, many, many years ago, contains certain biological things that say life exists on that planet. So we are not alone. Now, it may not be cousin Zog from Zeta Reticuli, but we are not alone in the universe. Advancing that to the next question is, are these life forms intelligent enough to create something that can get them from point A to point Z, or point Z for Peter, and get them to the Earth to come and visit us? That is the next big question. But I think, as Peter has said, my own personal belief is that, we're definitely not alone. There is intelligent life out there. It is visiting the planet. Why it's visiting the planet, whether it's friendly or an enemy, we don't know, because in my opinion, if it was friendly, it would have shown itself to be so. And if it was an enemy intent on overpowering us and taking over the planet, how can we stop it? We don't have the ability to stop it. So it's not doing A and it's not doing B. It's not helping us. It's not disarming us. It's just there. But for what reason? That is another question we need to answer.
Yeah.
Exactly. Melvin's just put a question there for Peter. Peter, what are your thoughts on the 31 Atlas, please?
My first thoughts were, it's absurd to think that something so monumentally large could be a construction, an intelligent construction, a massive spaceship, etc. At the same time, I try to keep an open mind, and if I'm going to limit my thinking by saying, oh, that can't be what Professor Avi Loeb is maintaining, that it is an intelligently constructed, huge thing coming into our solar system and making seeming a thoughtful pass through. Am I going to completely shut off my mind because I can't conceive of something that large being built in space? I felt the same way, and I still feel the same way about some people's claims that the moon, our moon, is manufactured. Respectfully, I think that's absolute nonsense. If it's misinterpreted and it's just this huge, incredibly long hunk of rock that seems to be moving in a way that we might consider intelligent, then what a remarkable opportunity to study it for the brief time that it's here. I understand it's only the third object categorized as such that has entered our solar system, not counting, comets and that kind of thing. It's a story that I am more and more curious about, and try to stay on whatever is breaking daily. I think we all should be. If it's the more mundane explanation, it's still pretty exciting. If it's the exotic explanation, then brave new world, here we are. If that can be established in terms that folks accept, that in itself might be the trigger, so to say, that creates a more full-fledged disclosure, and an undeniable one. I'm fascinated by it, though, and to remember how Professor Loeb started out in his UFO-related research, somewhat guarded and more cautious in his statements, makes all the sense in the world to me. And at the same time, now having come to support a claim that many people, especially those who are completely unfamiliar with what we're talking about, would consider nonsense and him a crackpot. I don't think he is a crackpot, and it isn't nonsense. So this is one for us all to keep an eye on, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, Steph just saying in the chat room said they are saying it's coming from the same area as space as a wow signal that happened in the 70s.
Yeah, I've heard that actually said as well, Bob. My own personal opinion of 31 Atlas is that it's a big rock, and that's it, basically. If it was a spacecraft and it was intelligently controlled, well, I'm afraid these intelligently aliens are not using the sensor system very well because they're flying past the Earth. They've come past Mars, and I think they're heading to the other side of the sun now, so we're not going to be able to see it, I believe, for quite a while while it comes out the other side. But if it was an intelligently controlled vehicle, it would go to the planet in this system that shows intelligence on that planet, if we can call the present state of the world and what's going on intelligent, so I just think it's a big rock. Yes, it is a very big rock, as Peter's outlined, and it is fascinating to think that it was formed long before the Earth and the Sun was formed, and it's now traveling through our solar system. That is absolutely fascinating just to think of that alone. Whether or not it's, again, it's cousin Zog coming to visit us, I strongly disagree with that, to be honest.
You bring up a very important point, Chris, that I sometimes forget, which is when faced with this allegation and the fact that whatever it is as massive as it is, and I've read different estimates of its size, but it's certainly miles and miles long, that we never lose our sense of wonder and become so technically oriented and analytical in our thinking that we can't appreciate this as just a natural piece of amazement.
Yeah, it is. If it is Cousin Zog coming to visit, fantastic. No one would be more happier than myself. But we do find that with this subject, we get a lot of people jumping on the bandwagon for their 10 minutes of, let's call it fame, for the want of a better word, and some people make some really outlandish claims with absolutely no evidence whatsoever for those claims.
Exactly.
But the fact that this thing, this rock, which is flying through the void that is, space, and it's heading towards us, and it was formed, I won't say created because that brings up a different argument. It was formed millions of years ago, and we're lucky enough to be alive at the time that it's flying past our planet and seeing it. That is, to me, that is absolutely amazing, and I'm very glad to be able to read about these things and see these things coming through.
Yeah, exactly.
I was about to say once in a lifetime, but it's once in a lot of lifetimes.
Exactly. Got a question from Rebecca King here for both of you, Peter and Chris. What's your thoughts on the theory that we're actually living in a simulation, a matrix type situation? She said, and I don't like the thought of it.
For me,
do you want to go first, Peter?
It's still a concept that exists in the world of science fiction and not science, like the idea of the multiverse, which I am completely entertained by as a science fiction construct, although theoretical physics tells us that almost anything is possible. And the best way to understand the multiverse as a concept is that everything that we have done in life, we have had moments where we could have done this other thing, where instead of going into this business, we went into this business, marrying this person instead of this person, making a left turn instead of a right turn, that all of those other lives that would have happened are happening in the multiverse. And then the fuse box blows out in my head. Again, I'm not a scientific person, but I have a good imagination, and I'm a pragmatist, but open to concepts that I sometimes can't fully understand or wrap my head around. But I've never seen anything, again, I'm not a physicist, so I wouldn't be looking there, that leads me to believe that, that idea, Bob, is a reality as opposed to an engaging fantasy at this point, at least in my mind.
How I actually think about that, I find it quite interesting that when we have certain events shown to us in science fiction on TV or on movies, that very, very quickly or very soon afterwards, we have these concepts coming into the subject. The Matrix movie, brilliant movie. I enjoyed it. Really good movie. But I don't believe that other areas, universes, or these kind of things actually exist. Back in the 1960s, I'm sure we all remember Star Trek when Captain Kirk, fought the prehistoric creature, the lizard type creature. Then all of a sudden we started having lizards coming through into the phenomenon, and it does seem that these ideas, these concepts come to TV or the movies first, and then they come into our subject. I only live in one universe, in one timeline. So that to me is all I care about, to be honest.
You know, you again bring up a great point, Chris. The, how can I say? You know, I'll pass on that. You bring up a great point, though.
Yes, we do. Yeah. I'd like to. How are we doing for time? Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about the Tic Tacs, about what Commander David Freya and other pilots specially report seeing during the 2004 encounters. What were they? Were they hours, or were they something else?
I think actually, Bob, what is more interesting is the recent piece of video footage that was shown at the recent hearings in Washington, where what appeared to be a Hellfire missile bounced off a Tic Tac. So if it's ours, why did the Hellfire missile not destroy the man-made object?
Yeah.
That to me is more fascinating than what happened in 2004.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
have to agree with you on that. It's a very simple video, but there's no denying what we're seeing, and no denials as such from the American government or NASA or any involved or potentially involved agency. It's kind of breathtaking. And at the same time, you know, that's
sorry, Peter.
The nature of their technology. They can do that.
Sorry, Peter. I was just going to say that, you know, the only other thing I can think about regarding this recent video on the Hellfire missile is that it may have been some kind of dummy test run. But, you know, I want to know more about where the video comes from, you know, from the source. But if it is the real deal, it is absolutely fascinating and at the same time scary. It goes back to the point that I made about that they're not coming to help us, they're not coming to destroy us, they're coming to observe for some reason. But where they come from again is the $6 million question, Peter.
Well, one thing that you bring up, and things in America are changing so fast in so many ways, that we know that under President Truman, there was a standing order that if a unidentified flying object did not identify itself in conventional terms when contacted by radio or however, that it should be fired upon. Yeah. That order went out of date years ago, and we now have a particularly aggressive Department of Defense calling itself the Department of War. I don't know if that will be finalized. And aggression, a macho stance in all respects as far as the military goes, and an intention to, well, be a rogue nation on a certain level and do whatever the hell we want to whomever we want to. I think by natural extension may be applied to these unknowns. We haven't heard a peep about the Space Force that I'm aware of, really since President Trump retook office. And I had thought that was part of their mission, you know, to be aware. And they're the Space Force. Kind of taken it off the Air Force as far as future conflicts in space. And I don't see any good coming from this. Also, the message we are sending all of them is, you know, we really are still pretty Neanderthal in our behavior, about drawing a line in the sand or the dirt, and that's your side, this is my side, And if you come over to my side, I'll kill your ass, because it's my side. We have a long way to go still. And it's getting more recalcitrant than ever here.
But at least you're doing something over there, Peter. The British government is doing nothing. We know they're part of the five powers, I think, which is America, Canada, Britain, Australia, I think, and I'm not certain. I think the other one is France or Italy, but at least we know what all these powers share this information. But why is the British government not done anything about this? We know UFOs exist. We've been told that, but we've been told that from America that UFOs exist. But yet the British government is still doing nothing. They should be doing exactly what you were doing over there. Not you personally, of course, but what you are doing over there in the United States, and putting the same arguments forward in Britain as to try and find out what these UFOs, UAPs are.
Yeah. Well, if they're doing it in private. It reminds me, though, that it might have been 20 years ago that the Ministry of Defense, in what I considered a very welcome move, started to declassify, not eyes only highest level of secrets, but started to declassify a good number of previously closely held UFO-related documentation to, I think, about 10,000 pieces, and then stop the program. It was very welcome while it was on, and there's a dedicated website one could visit, copy, read. I would love to see that again from both of our governments, as well as other governments, and other governments have been more forthcoming, often quieter so-called third world governments that don't have the impact or clout that we do and that you folks do.
Yeah, it appears that most of the world look to America to take the lead on this, which we do know, though, that there are many South American governments who actually let information out to the public. I think Brazil has, I think Chile has, and maybe Argentina has as well. But, France has allowed a certain amount of information to go out. But you can bet your bottom dollar, Peter, the real tasty bits, I bet they're keeping back.
Oh, I'm sure.
You remind me that during the disclosure event that Steve Bassett created at the National Press Club, I think in 2013, among the most interesting witnesses to present were two active fighter pilots. And I'm trying to remember whether they were Brazilian, Colombian, Venezuelan. I don't at the moment. Steve would certainly know. Who, in their statements, and we all had, immediate translations to our chosen language. It was very professional, talking about being scrambled and going after unknowns and describing them to us, and then being told that it was not unusual on a day where they weren't scheduled to fly to be told by their CO that they were going to be going to a high school and giving a presentation on the reality of UFOs to the students. No nonsense, just this is the way it is. Can we even imagine that kind of openness here or in the UK? What a wonderful thing to aspire to.
Exactly. I just want to ask you about this TikTok. If the TikToks are not human-made, what purpose might their behavior shadowing a Navy ship and toying with their pilots?
Well, there's always the idea of a psychological operation, a so-called psyops, to stage an event to study the reaction of the individuals who are exposed to it. and then making deductions for it. I think that's an outside chance. Whether or not this was an early kind of very sophisticated drone test or them in one form or another, I don't know. I've read compelling accounts making the point for either, but the jury's still out on that for me.
What we do find is that secret technology, which was once hidden away, does eventually make its way out into the public domain. So we, keep your eyes open for these kind of things coming through the sky. But if they're not human-made, you got to ask, where are they from? There are no control surfaces on them, allowing no ailerons, no tails, or anything like that. I mean, how does something like that fly in the conventional sense of the word fly? I think a lot of people have suggested that these kind of devices may come from under the oceans, that we may have some kind of intelligent life under our own oceans. But how did they find out that the planet itself was populated? The earth, the land, not the sea, was populated. So these creatures underneath must have some kind of devices which tells them what's going on top of the planet. Now, I go back to my own sighting, which kind of backs that up, from 1974. When I shouted, "Look, guys, there's a UFO up in the sky," it simply vanished. But yet it was many, many miles above me in the atmosphere. Completely clear sky that night, early evening, round about 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening in February, dark sky, but it just completely vanished. And it did not continue its journey across the evening sky, just completely blinked out. So did it have some kind of listening device? So we know that these devices are coming from some unknown intelligent species.
Yeah, very
Well, that's quite in you both.
Well, it's true that, yeah. I'm with you there.
Yeah, it's true, yeah.
What are they? But
Well,
when you talk about the Earth, I think we've got 75% of the Earth is water.
Yeah.
So
well, that's another big question, and one that is receiving more attention these days. A great American ufologist, Debbie Ziegelmeyer, wrote a book on underwater UFOs last year, or was published last year, and Richard Dolan published the first of what he says is going to be a 3-volume set on underwater UFOs. His first book is out and most compelling. It seemed to me from the time I became interested in the subject that if such craft can be built to traverse these incredible, unimaginable distances in space, that they probably technologically advanced enough that when they get here, they're waterproof. And it begs the question of how much is going on under the waters, oceans, and lakes all around this world. A subject that decades ago, secret underwater bases just sounded like silly, goofy science fiction nonsense, and now sounds like the way it is to me.
I actually, absolutely agree with you. If I get my words out correctly, I do agree with you. And I've actually been doing my second book myself on USOs. So I am quite familiar with a lot of the sightings. We've had everything from Cold War Russian submarine commanders to people seeing UFOs landing in canals in London, during the 60s and 70s. Yeah. These are strange things, in a lot of ways, very similar to UFOs flying in our skies, but also very, very different at the same time, in that they can go underwater.
Another thing is what people say as well. Could the Tic Tacs be secret UFO US projects?
Well, my understanding is, I think Tic Tacs, yeah, I think the majority what we know about have come from America, places like the Channel Islands off California, around there. But I also think some have been seen in the Pacific. I also understand, it's one of the things I'm looking into at the moment, is that some have been seen off Japan and near Korea. So, you know, it's not just an American event that these things are being witnessed in.
Hey, strange. Stargazer in the chat room says, who remembers the Enterprise rising out of the ocean? The Star Trek movie.
Yep, it did that. I think it was one of the more modern Star Trek movies, one that's been made over the last 10 years, if I remember correctly, Stargazer.
In 1971, I think, an American biologist who had become fascinated by the UFO subject, Ivan T. Sanderson, great writer,
Yep.
Gave us 2 volumes, one called Invisible Residents and the other called Uninvited Visitors. Uninvited Visitors was a general look at the UFO subject and had the distinction in the publishing world of it had a die-cut cover with a round circle removed in the wrapper and a hologram, very simple one on the cover. But Invisible Residents was my introduction to the idea and the subject, and then cases of underwater UFOs. And from the first page, it really hits the ground running. It's a book you can pick up for a couple of bucks used, you know, in any internet book source. And a good one to have in one's library as well.
I've actually got a copy of Ivan T. Sanderson's one of his books. Anyway. I can't remember exactly which one it is right now, Peter, but yeah, I've got one. And it is absolutely fascinating how he's, well, considering his background and how he got interested in the subject, I think he's laid it out brilliantly. Easily understandable, very readable.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you think it's a good book to get for beginners then?
Yes, absolutely, Bob.
Again, you know, we're readers, and for a lot of folks, younger folks, and I absolutely understand it, having a physical library is not nearly as important as having the information. And more, you know, out-of-print books are available scanned online, one place or another. But there really is no substitute for a physical library and books that have stood the test of time in terms of presenting information that has never been refuted, or if it has been, that it's documented and you can look it up. I bring it up in part because I remember cracking the cover on the Sanderson book, Invisible Residents, and the very first paragraph of the book was just one of those reading moments where you say, hell, I am there already. This is fascinating. And it was a description of an icebreaker, either at the North or South Pole or close on duty, brutally cold out, and men on watch observing, who happened to be looking in that direction, a fully articulated disc coming smashing up through the ice. And we're talking major pack ice, many feet thick.
Yeah.
And pieces of ice huge that could have killed a person, you know, flying all over, including hitting the deck of the ship. And I think that the last sentence of the first paragraph is to the effect of the men who observed this were not amused, period, nor are we. And that's how the book begins. Again, we are in a subject where no matter how much we know, what is underscored is how much we don't know. I think it's fair to say that for some people at a certain point, you hit a level of frustration to say, damn it, I've decided I'm going to believe something. And you choose what you're most comfortable or, you know, what you want to believe. And that becomes, you know, your banner. And sometimes it's true and sometimes it isn't. But better to be open to the possibilities than to dogmatically attach oneself to a set of ideas that are unbendable and rigid. And
I've got to say, Peter, that's very, very well said. Completely agree with that last statement. Thank you.
Yeah, I totally agree with you as well, because you never know what's going to happen in the future. We all can surmise what's going to happen. Will it ever happen? We don't know. But you're doing your great work, Peter, out there as well. Thank God you're around because you do put a lot of time into what you do. And I think people like you, we should look up to.
Well, I'm not tall enough to be looked up to.
Behave.
I know so. Thank you. I just thought of that.
Yes, I know. I'm with you there. I thought I was small, but
You're being heightist, Peter.
Yes. But Peter, I know we're about coming to the end of the show. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
My website is woefully out of date right now and actually unavailable, but I am on Facebook. Believe it or not, there are more than one Peter Robbins on Facebook. Yeah. I'm the one that's located near or in Ithaca, New York, as it says. And people can write to me at my email address, which is my first initial and last name and home state, PROBBINSNY@yahoo.com.
Right. What about you, Chris? Where, you're writing another book. Where can people get your book? I know you wrote another book. Where can the people get your book? And if they want to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
They can find me on www.olm-mag.co.uk, or they can email me at theouterlimitsmag, which is all one word, at gmail.com. And my book is available only from me at the moment, so if people would like a copy, just give me a quick email and I'll let you know the details, and including post, and we'll get it sent out to you. But it's only available in the United Kingdom.
Right. Yeah. Well, otherwise it'd cost you too much to send it over there, wouldn't it?
It absolutely would. Yeah, it absolutely would.
It's not cheap anymore to send books.
No, I'm afraid those days have gone both sides of the pond, I think, Peter.
Amen. It's a shame. You're mentioning Graham Birdsall earlier. Boy, do I miss that guy. I guess I could say he was a mentor of mine as well from the time that we met in the late in the 1990s for sure. And we lost him much too young. He was 49, but he had packed in more into his life than most people could do in a number of reincarnations, and a better or more principled researcher, investigator, publisher, inspiration in the work, I'm damned if I can think of.
He was just good at what he did. Simple as that, Peter. And he was, I completely agree with you. Completely miss the guy. He would do absolutely anything to further the subject and for anybody involved in the subject.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, it's been a brilliant show tonight with Chris on as well, besides Peter. It's always nice to have a different pattern, and I might do this in the future as well. Not just one guest. Have a couple of guests on.
Well, hopefully for next time, Bob, I'll have my video camera sorted out, and
yes,
we can frighten you viewers then, can't we?
Yes. Hey, Chris, you take care of yourself.
I will do, mate, and you do as well. Absolutely. And
thank you, Peter. You look after yourself as well.
I will. Peter. It's my pleasure and wonderful spending this hour with you two guys.
Thank you. When I speak to Paul, I'll send him your regards.
And mine as well, please, Bob.
Yeah, I will do, Chris. I will
Great.
do. Yeah, so thank you again. And look forward to next Wednesday. Where we go next Wednesday? Oh. Let's have a quick look. Mike Clearland, I think pronounce his last name.
I think it's Mike Cleland. Yeah, Mike Cleland. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're in for a great show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mike is one of our most articulate, thoughtful abductee writers, and one of the nicest people in the work as well.
Oh, brilliant. I'm glad about that as well. So it'd be great to have him next Wednesday. That's the 15th of October, next week at 7 p.m. in the UK. And but everybody can listen to it around the world. So thank you again, both of you. It's been great as usual. Fascinating show. Good night from the UK, Peter, and enjoy the rest of the evening, Chris.
I will do. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Is that all right, Bob?
Yeah, brilliant. I'm just finishing.